I discovered on my channel when I found the Navaratri and their nine, the sequence of the nine that articulates the same every time after time. Something that was really, really wild to me was realizing that these descriptions, you could just switch the names, the Hindu names of the Devis, and you could plug in the nine muses of the Greeks, and nothing else would change but the names. And so there is a fun plug-in from the Hindu descriptions of their nature. You could take the muse, one muse for each of the nine, and plug it in, and it's a beautiful echo of the same thing. And for me, that was really rewarding because I'm most of us are familiar with the nine different arts. And so I'll just do a quick walkthrough that is a reiteration of everything that Franklin just said, but in a Greek context. And these muses, I love them so much. I love them so much. And in a fun way, I feel like this a strange masculine protective drive to because I hear other channels out there trying to associate the muse with things that I wouldn't associate them with, but it's not for me to defend them because they're immortal. But so that the first day, so this comes from my studying the symposium. Plato's Symposium is essentially 7 dudes sitting in a circle with one empty seat, and then an interloper comes in and gives a final speech that wins the entire competition. And a fun thing, any number divided by 7 will give you some derivative of the internal heptad of the Enneagram. So there's 7 dudes, and then the one guy comes in the middle of it, and you divide 1 by 7, and you get 142857, 142857 repeated. That's this internal pattern here. So the magic of the 7 is also powerfully alive and well in the internal heptad of the Enneagram. But these guys are sitting around and they're going to take turns talking about love. And what I realized is that each one of them has a different career path, a different calling, a different muse that they are speaking for. So the masculine is on the public facing side. And this is where I'm always saying, don't underestimate them, y'all. Don't underestimate them. The divine feminine is never absent. She's never absent. She is being drawn upon all the time. And so everybody's like, oh, it's a patriarchy. And I'm like, you're just not respecting the correspondence of the public and the private. Because on the private is where the real power is drawn from, the source. So each dude is talking, but he's drawing on his origin. His wisdom is coming through the feminine. And so the first dude is Phaedrus, and Phaedrus is a rhetorician. And there's only one muse who can be the source that he's drawing from, and that is Polyhymnia. Polyhymnia is the muse of rhetoric and speech and poetry, also eloquent poetry. And then the second speaker is a lawbringer. He's a lawyer. And his name is Pausanias, and there's only one appropriate muse for him to be the mouthpiece of, and that is Clio, the muse of history. And she's often depicted with tablets or scrolls, and then also a horn on her hip. And the word, the horn is sometimes let me say this right. Her name is Clio, and sometimes another translation of Clio is the word glory. And so if you are going to be favorably reflected after your time here, if history is going to reflect favorably upon you, they will sing your glory. You will have a glorious story that it lives past your lifetime here. And so if you appease Clio, then she will sing favorably upon you. theoretically. And so the second speaker is the lawyer. His muse has to be Cleo. The third speaker, there's a little switch right here. This is the hiccup in the symposium that is brought on like a frenzy from the hypocrisy of the lawyer. And so there's a case of hiccups that the third speaker can't speak in his turn. He has to sit out. He gets de-seated and moved down to the fourth spot. And the third person moves into the fourth person moves into the third spot. So there's a switcheroo between the 3 and the 4. And so the therapist, the healer, the physician speaks in the third position, and he speaks about harmony of the body to heal. And his name is Eryximachus, and he's speaking about the harmony of healing. This is the muse of the sick. He's talking about using music to cure those who are sick. And the only muse for music is Euterpe. Primarily, I shouldn't say the only muse for music. That's a little inaccurate. More accurate is to say the only muse of harmony for curing the body is Euterpe, and she's the third muse. And the guy who caught the hiccups, he's a comedian, and his hiccups are in fact a big distraction in the symposium sequence. It's very funny. It's very comical. Well, there's only one muse of comedy out of the 9 in the Greek muses, and that is Thalia. Thalia is the muse of comedy. She's often carrying a shepherd's crook or a smiley face. And Franklin, when you were talking about Kushmanda creates with her smile. Her essence is symbolized by a smile or a smiling mask. And so the Kushmanda and Thalia are powerfully correspondent to each other. And during the Navaratri, the hidden one up in the summer during the Trump event, there was a double bump on the Thalia, the muse of comedy, or the Devi of Kushmanda. There was they observed the rule of Kal-El. She got the day of July 9th and July 10th. She got the rule of Kal-El that landed in her position. And that's kind of signaling to me some really deep, profound things I won't go into. But it is, these cards are, they are sponsored by a secret society that calls themselves Thalima. And it was Thalia who got the double bump on over the Trump event. So then moving on, the next speaker in the symposium is a tragedian. Agathon is the host of the party. And there's only one muse who is the muse of tragedy, and her name is Melpomene. And I always say she's a sad, sad pussycat. She's always looking droopy and sad and sulking. She has a sad, frowny tragedy mask, and she often has a dagger in the other hand. She also has a sumptuous dress. She has many, many signs and symbols, but it's through those signs and symbols that I was able to correspond them to the Devis. It's really wildly rewarding to know them in their different incarnations. They're not exactly the same thing, but they are reiterations of fundamental truth, just with cultural differences, very important cultural differences. And then the 6th position is actually an empty seat. But the 6th muse is the muse of eroticism, erotic poetry. And because the subject of the symposium is Eros, and Eros is one of the children of Erato. So the number 6 position, this was Katyayani in the sequence of the Devis. Has a very strong Artemis relationship, this number 6. But there is an aspect of being hidden or, ever present, just like love, but also having many fractal expressions of that truth. Number 7 is Socrates in the symposium, and he only has one possible muse. It has to be the eldest of all the muses, because he is the eldest speaker, the most wise. and that's Calliope. Calliope is the muse who inspired all the epic poetry, but also Socrates is the best swordsman in Athens, and he's very powerful. You don't want to mess with him, much like Ka'alratri out of the sequence of the Devis. So Socrates' muse Calliope, her name sounds just like Ka'alratri. It's almost the same word. So this muse, Calliope, who inspired Homer to write the epics, seems to be having gotten a little bit of a hail sign during the Trump event. And that's also, Trump has been correspondent to number 7, the chariot, and 16, the tower, both summed to a 7, Trump Tower. So yeah, Ka'alratri and Calliope are powerfully related to each other. Then the number 8 speaker is, everybody thinks the symposium is over at that part. And we're actually crossing out of the thinking group into action. Number 8 in the Enneagram is the beginning of the acting trine. And so everybody has been sitting around talking about love, and they think that Socrates is one. They're like, we knew you were going to trump all of us. We knew you were going to trump all of us. Good job, Socrates. And just when he thinks it's time to pat himself on the back, there's a ruckus outside of the building, and somebody has caused a commotion. And this is Alcibiades. And he comes stumbling in, hanging off of a couple of the serving ladies, and he's drunk off his ass. And he comes into the party, and he gets invited to give his eulogy. And he gives a drunken master style praise to Socrates about what love is. And he ends up winning. He ends up trumping the Trump of Socrates in kind of closing off the performance. And this is Mahagauri. Mahagauri is the number 8 Devi. And then Siddhatri is the number 9th Devi. But in the symposium, the number 9 is implied because Plato wasn't at the symposium. He's telling the story from through many retellings. It's through word of mouth. And so Plato actually gets the number 9 spot with the Siddhatri. But that's also a balanced peacekeeper with the shadow of sloth. And it even has a very strong echo in the word Siddhartha. Siddhartha is balanced, mediating peacekeeper with the shadow of sloth, because, to practice Zen is to find stillness. So it's very fascinating how the Buddha, the Plato, and this top aspect of the Enneagram have so much harmonic truth that they're all based upon. And we're just making mouth sounds, trying to specify them or try to claim them for this culture or that culture. It doesn't have to be a competition. We're just putting different word noises to a touchstone fundamental truth that is in the Enneagram still today. So that's kind of my overlay onto the Navaratri.